Good evening. I hope you've had a great day today. Welcome to BVJ's Bedtime Stories. My name is Big Voice J, and this is the show where we get you ready for a good night's sleep with public domain short stories that can be enjoyed by kids and adults. We hope you enjoy it. Think everything will work. Tonight's story is The Gingerbread Man. If you are live with us right here at twitch.tv/BigVoiceJ, you can follow along as we read. Once again, tonight's story is The Gingerbread Man. Please enjoy this with pictures and decorations by Robert Gaston Herbert, 1910. We've taken the liberty of adding the Gingerbread Man's haunting chant as he evades his captors throughout the story. Run, 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 fast as you can. You can't catch me, I'm the Gingerbread Man. One day, let's see, what we have this in here? We don't have that in there. That's in there. Okay, good. Let's try this. Move this over here. Here we go. One day, a cook went into the kitchen to make some gingerbread. She took some flour and water and treacle and ginger and mixed them all well together. And she put in some more water to make it thin, and then some more flour to make it thick. And a little salt and a little spice. And then she rolled it out into a beautiful, smooth, dark yellow dough. Then she took the square tins and cut out some square cakes for the little boys. And with some round tins, she cut out some round cakes for the little girls. And then she said, I'm going to make a gingerbread man for little Bobby. So she took a nice round lump of dough for his body and a smaller lump for his head, which she pulled out a little for the neck. 2 other lumps were stuck on beneath for the legs, and were pulled out with proper shape, with feet and toes all complete. And 2 still smaller pieces were made into arms, with dear little hands and fingers. The nicest work was done on the head. At the top was frizzed up into a pretty sugary hat. On either side was made a dear little ear, and in front, after the nose had been carefully molded, a beautiful mouth was made out of a big raisin, and 2 little eyes with burnt almonds and caraway seeds. Then the gingerbread man was finished, ready for baking, and a very jolly little man he was. In fact, he looked so sly that the cook was afraid he was plotting some mischief. And when the batter was ready for the oven, she put in the square cakes and she put in the round cakes. And then she put in the little gingerbread man in a far back corner, where he couldn't get away in a hurry. Then she went up to sweep the parlor, and she swept till the clock struck 12. When she dropped her broom in a hurry, and exclaiming, "Looks! The gingerbread we all baked to a cinder!" She ran down into the kitchen and threw open the oven door. And the square cakes were all done, nice and hard and brown. And the round cakes were all done, nice and hard and brown. And the gingerbread man was all done too, nice and hard and brown. And he was standing up in his corner with his little caraway seed eyes sparkling, and his raisin mouth bubbling over with mischief, while he waited for the oven door to be opened. The instant the door was opened, with a hop, skip, and a jump, he went right over the square cakes and the round cakes, and over the cook's arm, and before she could say, "Jack Robinson," he was running across the kitchen floor as fast as his little legs would carry him, towards the back door, which was standing wide open, and through which he could see the garden path. "Run, run, run, fast as you can! You can't catch me! I'm the Gingerbread Man!" The old cook turned round as fast as she could, which wasn't very fast, for she was a rather heavy woman, and she had been quite taken by surprise, and she saw lying right across the doorway, fast asleep in the sun, old Mouser the cat. "Mouser, Mouser," she cried, "stop the Gingerbread Man! I want him for little Bobby!" When the cook first called, Mouser thought it was only someone calling in her dreams and simply rolled over lazily. And the cook called again, "Mouser! Mouser!" The old cat sprang up with a jump, but just as she turned around to ask the cook what all the noise was about, the little Gingerbread Man cleverly jumped under her tail, and in an instant was trotting down the garden walk. Mouser turned in a hurry and ran after, although she was still rather too sleepy to know what it was she was trying to catch. And after the cat came the cook, lumbering along rather heavily, but also making pretty good speed. Now at the bottom of the walk, lying fast asleep in the sun, against the warm stones of the garden wall, was Towser the dog. And the cook called out, "Towser! Towser! Stop the Gingerbread Man! I want him for little Bobby!" And when Towser first heard her calling, he thought it was someone speaking in his dreams. And he only turned over on his side with another snore, and then the cook called again, "Towser! Towser! Stop him! Stop him!" And the dog woke up in good earnest and jumped up on his feet to see what it was that he should stop. But just as the dog jumped up, the little Gingerbread Man, who had been watching for the chance, quietly slipped between his legs and climbed up on the top of the stone wall, so that Towser saw nothing but the cat running towards him down the walk, and behind the cat the cook, now quite out of breath. "Run, run, fast as you can! You can't catch me! I'm the Gingerbread Man!" He thought at once that the cat must have stolen something, and that it was the cat the cook wanted him to stop. Now, if there was anything that Towser liked, it was going after the cat. And he jumped up the walk so fiercely that the poor cat did not have time to stop herself or to get out of his way. And they came together with a great fizzing and barking and meowing and howling and scratching and biting, as if a couple of Catherine wheels had gone off in the wrong way and had got mixed up with one another. But the old cook had been running so hard that she was not able to stop herself any better than the cat had done. And she fell right on top of the mixed-up dog and cat, so that all three rolled over on the walk in a heap together. And the cat scratched whichever came nearest, whether it was a piece of the dog or of the cook. And the dog bit at whatever came nearest, whether it was a piece of the cat or of the cook, so that the poor cook was badly pummeled on both sides. Meanwhile, the Gingerbread Man had climbed up on the garden wall and stood on the top with his hands in his pockets, looking at the scrimmage, and laughing till the tears ran down his little caraway-seed eyes, and his raisin mouth was bubbling all over with fun. "Run, run, fast as you can! You can't catch me! I'm the Gingerbread Man!" After a little while, the cat managed to pull herself out from under the cook and the dog, and a very cast-down and crumpled-up-looking cat she was. She had had enough of hunting Gingerbread Men, and she crept back to the kitchen to repair damages. The dog, who was very cross because his face had been badly scratched, let go of the cook, and at last, catching sight of the Gingerbread Man, made a bolt for the garden wall. The cook picked herself up, and although her face was also badly scratched and her dress was torn, she was determined to see the end of the chase. And she followed after the dog, though this time more slowly. When the gingerbread man saw the dog coming, he jumped down on the farther side of the wall and began running across the field. Now in the middle of the field was a tree, and at the foot of the tree was lying Jocko the monkey. He wasn't asleep. Monkeys never are. And when he saw the little man running across the field and heard the cook calling, "Jocko! Jocko! Stop the gingerbread man!" he at once gave one big jump. But he jumped so fast and so far that he went right over the gingerbread man. And as luck would have it, he came down on the back of Towser the dog, who had just scrambled over the wall and whom he had not before noticed. Towser was naturally taken by surprise, but he turned his head around and promptly bit off the end of the monkey's tail, and Jocko quickly jumped off again, chattering his indignation. Meanwhile, the gingerbread man had got to the bottom of the tree and was saying to himself, "Now I know the dog can't climb a tree, and I don't believe the old cook can climb a tree. And as far as the monkey, I'm not sure, for I've never seen a monkey before, but I am going up." So he pulled himself hand over hand until he got to the topmost branch. "Climb, climb, fast as you can! You can't catch me! I'm the gingerbread man!" But the monkey had jumped with one spring onto the lowest branch, and in an instant, he also was at the top of the tree. The gingerbread man crawled out to the furthermost end of the branch and hung by one hand, but the monkey swung himself onto the branch, and stretching out his long arm, he pulled the gingerbread man in. Then he held him up and looked at him so hungrily that the little raisin mouth began to pucker down at the corners, and the caraway seed eyes filled with tears. And what do you think happened then? Why, little Bobby himself came running up. He had been taking his noonday nap upstairs, and in his dreams it seemed as if he had kept hearing people call, "Little Bobby, little Bobby," until finally he jumped up with a start, and was so sure that someone was calling him that he ran downstairs, without even waiting to put on his shoes. As he came down, he could see through the window in the field, beyond the garden, the cook, and the dog, and the monkey. And he could even hear the barking of Towser and the chattering of Jocko. He scampered down the walk with his little bare feet pattering against the warm gravel, climbed over the wall, and in a few seconds arrived under the tree, just as Jocko was holding up the poor little gingerbread man. "Drop it, Jocko!" cried Bobby. And drop it Jocko did, for he always had to mind Bobby. He dropped it so straight that the gingerbread man fell right into Bobby's uplifted pinafore. Then Bobby held him up and looked at him, and the little raisin mouth puckered down lower than ever, and the tears ran out of the caraway seed eyes. But Bobby was too hungry to mind gingerbread tears, and he gave one big bite and swallowed down both legs and a piece of the body. "Oh," said the gingerbread man, "I'm 1/3 gone." Bobby gave a second bite and swallowed the rest of the body and the arms. "Oh," said the gingerbread man, "I'm 2/3 gone." Bobby gave a third bite and gulped down the head. "Oh," said the gingerbread man, "I'm all gone." And so he was. And that is the end of the story. Would you like more? That is the end of tonight's story. Do you want more? Do you have a story you'd like me to read? Email me, bigvoicej@gmail.com. Join us live every Monday to Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern, at twitch.tv/bigvoicej. The website for the podcast is coming soon, and you can subscribe, and you can give us a review. Tonight's story is Hansel and Gretel by the Brothers Grimm. Okay. Hard by a great forest dwelt a poor woodcutter with his wife and his 2 children. The boy was named Hansel and the girl Gretel. He had little to bite and to break, and once, when great scarcity fell on the land, he could no longer procure daily bread. Now when he thought over this by night in his bed and tossed about in his anxiety, he groaned and said to his wife, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children when we no longer have anything even for ourselves?" "I'll tell you what, husband," answered the woman. "Early tomorrow morning we will take the children out into the forest to where it is the thickest. There we will light a fire for them and give each of them 1 piece of bread more, and then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will not find the way home again, and we shall be rid of them." "No, wife," said the man. "I will not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest? The wild animals would soon come and tear them to pieces." "Oh, thou fool," said she. "Then we must all 4 die of hunger. You mayest as well plane the planks for our coffins." And she left him no peace until he consented. "But I feel very sorry for the poor children all the same," said the man. The 2 children had also not been able to sleep for hunger, and had heard what their stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitter tears and said to Hansel, "Now all is over with us." "Be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel. "Do not distress thyself. I will soon find a way to help us." And when the old folks had fallen asleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the door below, and crept outside. The moon shone brightly, and the white pebbles which lay in front of the house glittered like real silver pennies. Hansel stooped and put as many of them in the little pocket of his coat as he could possibly get in. Then he went back and said to Gretel, "Be comforted, dear little sister, and sleep in peace. God will not forsake us." And he lay down again in his bed. When day dawned, but before the sun had risen, the woman came and awoke the 2 children, saying, "Get up, you sluggards. We are going into the forest to fetch wood." She gave each a little piece of bread and said, "There is something for your dinner, but do not eat it up before then. There is something for your dinner, but do not eat it up before then, for you will get nothing else." Gretel took the bread on her apron, as Hansel hid the stones in his pocket. Then they all set out together on the way to the forest. When they had walked a short time, Hansel stood still and peeped back at the house, and did so again and again. His father said, "Hansel, what art thou looking at there and staying behind for? Mind what thou art about, and do not forget how to use thy legs." "Ah, father," said Hansel, "I am looking at my little white cat, which is sitting up on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me." The wife said, "Fool, that is not thy little cat. That is the morning sun which is shining on the chimneys." Hansel, however, had not been looking back at the cat, but had been constantly throwing one of the white pebble stones out of the pocket on the road. When they had reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Now, children, pile up some wood, and I will light a fire so that you may not be cold." Hansel and Gretel gathered brushwood together as high as a little hill. The brushwood was lighted, and when the flames were burning very high, the woman said, "Now, children, lay yourselves down by the fire and rest. We will go into the forest and cut some wood. When we have done, we will come back and fetch you away." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and when noon came, each ate a little piece of bread. And as they heard the strokes of the wood axe, they believed that their father was near. It was not, however, the axe. It was a branch which he had fastened to a withered tree, which the wind was blowing backwards and forwards. And as they had been sitting such a long time, their eyes shot with fatigue, and they fell fast asleep. When at last they awoke, it was already dark night. Gretel began to cry and said, "How are we to get out of the forest now?" But Hansel comforted her and said, "Just wait a little until the moon has risen, and then we will soon find the way." And when the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and followed the pebbles which shone like newly coined silver pieces and showed them the way. They walked the whole night long, and by break of day came once more to their father's house. They knocked at the door, and when the woman opened it and saw that it was Hansel and Gretel, she said, "You naughty children! Why have you slept so long in the forest? We thought you were never coming back at all." The father, however, rejoiced, for it had cut him to the heart to leave them behind alone. Not long afterwards, there was once more great scarcity in all parts, and the children heard their mother saying at night to their father, "Everything is eaten again. We have 1/2 loaf left, and after that there is an end. The children must go. We will take them farther into the wood, so that they will not find their way out again. There is no other means of saving ourselves." The man's heart was heavy, and he thought, "It would be better for thee to share the last mouthful with thy children." The woman, however, would listen to nothing that he had to say, but scolded and reproached him. He who says A must say B likewise, and as he had yielded the first time, he had to do a second time also. The children, however, were still awake and had heard the conversation. When the old folks were asleep, Hansel again got up and wanted to go out and pick up pebbles as he had done before, but the woman had locked the door and Hansel could not get out. Nevertheless, he comforted his little sister and said, "Do not cry, Gretel. Go to sleep quietly. The good God will help us." Early in the morning came the woman and took the children out of their beds. Their bit of bread was given to them, but it was still smaller than the time before. On the way into the forest, Hansel crumbled his in his pocket, and often stood still and threw a morsel on the ground. "Hansel, why dost thou stop and look round?" said the father. "Go on!" "I am looking back at my little pigeon which is sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me," answered Hansel. "Simpleton," said the woman. "It is not thy little pigeon. That is the morning sun that is shining on the chimney." Hansel, however, little by little, threw all the crumbs on the path. The woman led the children still deeper into the forest, where they had never in their lives been before. Then a great fire was again made, and his mother said, "Just sit there, you children, and when you are tired you may sleep a little. We are going into the forest to cut wood, and in the evening when we are done, we will come and fetch you away." When it was noon, Gretel shared her piece of bread with Hansel, who had scattered his by the way. Then they fell asleep, and evening came and went, but no one came for the poor children. They did not awake until it was dark night, and Hansel comforted his little sister and said, "Just wait, Gretel, until the moon rises, and then we shall see the crumbs of bread which I have strewn about. They will show us our way home again." When the moon came, they set out, but they found no crumbs, for the many thousands of birds which fly about in the woods and fields had picked them all up. Hansel said to Gretel, "We shall soon find the way." But they did not find it. They walked the whole night and into the next day, from morning till evening, but they did not get out of the forest and were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but 2 or 3 berries, which grew on the ground. And they were so weary that their legs would carry them no longer. They lay down beneath a tree and fell asleep. It was now 3 mornings since they had left their father's house. They began to walk again, but they always got deeper into the forest. And if help did not come soon, they must die of hunger and weariness. When it was midday, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a bough, which sang so delightfully that they stood still and listened to it. And when it had finished its song, it spread its wings and flew away before them, and they followed it until they reached a little house, on the roof of which it alighted. And when they came quite up to the little house, they saw that it was built of bread and covered with cakes, but that the windows were of clear sugar. "We will set to work on that," said Hansel, "and have a good meal. I will eat a bit of the roof, and thou, Gretel, canst eat some of the window. It will taste sweet." Hansel reached up above and broke off a little of the roof to try how it tasted, and Gretel leant against the window and nibbled at the panes. Then a soft voice cried from the room, "Nibble, nibble, gnaw. Who is nibbling at my little house?" The children answered, "The wind, the wind, the heaven-born wind," and went on eating without disturbing themselves. Hansel, who thought the roof tasted very nice, tore down a great piece of it, and Gretel pushed out the whole of one round window pane, sat down, and enjoyed herself with it. Suddenly the door opened, and a very, very old woman who supported herself on crutches came creeping out. Hansel and Gretel were so terribly frightened that they let fall what they had in their hands. The old woman, however, nodded her head and said, "Oh, you dear children, what has brought you here? Do come in and stay with me. No harm shall happen to you." She took them both by the hand and led them into her little house. Then good food was set before them, milk and pancakes, with sugar, apples, and nuts. Afterwards 2 pretty little beds were covered with clean white linen, and Hansel and Gretel lay down on them and thought they were in heaven. The old woman had only pretended to be so kind. She was in reality a wicked witch who lay in wait for the children and had only built a little house of bread in order to entice them there. When a child fell into her power, she killed it, cooked and ate it, and that was a feast day for her. Witches have red eyes and cannot see far, but they have a keen scent like the beasts and are aware when human beings draw near. When Hansel and Gretel came into our neighborhood, she laughed maliciously and said mockingly, "I have them. They shall not escape me again." Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she was already up. And when she saw both of them sleeping and looking so pretty with their plump red cheeks, she muttered to herself, "That will be a dainty mouthful." Then she seized Hansel with her shriveled hand, carried him into a little stable, and shut him in with a grated door. He might scream as he liked. That was of no use. Then she went to Gretel, shook her till she awoke and cried, "Get up, lazy thing, fetch some water, and cook something good for thy brother. He is in the stable outside and is to be made fat. When he is fat, I will eat him." Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was all in vain. She was forced to do what the wicked witch ordered her. And now the best food was cooked for poor Hansel, but Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every morning the woman crept to the little stable and cried, "Hansel, stretch out thy finger, that I may feel if thou wilt soon be fat." Hansel, however, stretched out a little bone to her, and the old woman, who had dim eyes, could not see it, and thought it was Hansel's finger, and was astonished that there was no way of fattening him. When 4 weeks had gone by, and Hansel still continued thin, she was seized with impatience and would not wait any longer. "Hola, Gretel," she cried to the girl. "Be active, and bring some water. Let Hansel be fat or lean, tomorrow I will kill him and cook him." Ah, how the poor little sister did lament when she had to fetch the water, and how the tears did flow down over her cheeks. "Dear God, do help us," she cried. "If the wild beasts in the forest have not devoured us, we should at any rate have died together." "Just keep thy noise to thyself," said the old woman, "and that will not help thee at all." Early in the morning, Gretel had to go out and hang up the cauldron with the water and light the fire. "We will bake first," said the old woman. "I have already heated the oven and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel out to the oven, from which flames of fire were already darting. "Creep in," said the witch, "and see if it is properly heated, so that we can shut the bread in." And when once Gretel was inside, she intended to shut the oven and let her bake in it, and then she would eat her too. But Gretel saw what she had in her mind and said, "I do not know how I am to do it. How do you get in?" "Silly goose," said the old woman. "The door is big enough. Just look, I can get in myself." And she crept up and thrust her head into the oven. Then Gretel gave her a push that drove her far into it, and shut the iron door, and fastened the bolt. "Oh!" Then she began to howl quite horribly, but Gretel ran away, and the godless witch was miserably burnt to death. Gretel, however, ran like lightning to Hansel, opened his little stable, and cried, "Hansel, we are saved! The old witch is dead!" Then Hansel sprang out like a bird from its cage when the doors opened for it. How they did rejoice and embrace each other, and dance about and kiss each other. And as they had no longer any need to fear her, they went into the witch's house, and in every corner there stood chests full of pearls and jewels. "These are far better than pebbles," said Hansel, and thrust into his pockets whatever could he get in. And the Gretel said, "I too will take something home with me," and filled her pinafore full. "But now we will go away," said Hansel, "that we may get out of the witch's forest." When they had walked for 2 hours, they came to a great piece of water. "We cannot get over," said Hansel. "I see no footplank and no bridge." "And no boat crosses either," answered Gretel. "But a white duck is swimming there. If I ask her, she will help us over." Then she cried, "Little duck, little duck, dost thou see? Hansel and Gretel are waiting for thee. There's never a plank or bridge in sight. Take us across on thy back so white." The duck came to them, and Hansel seated himself on its back, and told his sister to sit by him. "No," replied Gretel, "that will be too heavy for the little duck. She will take us across one after the other." The good little duck did so, and when they were once safely across and had walked for a short time, the forest seemed to be more and more familiar to them. And at length they saw, from afar, their father's house. Then they began to run, rushed into the parlor, and threw themselves into their father's arms. The man had not known one happy hour since he had left the children in the forest. The woman, however, was dead. Gretel emptied her pinafore until pearls and precious stones ran about the room, and Hansel threw one handful after another out of his pocket to add to them. Then all anxiety was at an end, and they lived together in perfect happiness. My tale is done. There runs a mouse. Whosoever catches it may make himself a big fur cap out of it. Tonight's story is The Chicken Who Wouldn't Eat Gravel by Clara Dilingham Pierson. It was some time after the Dorking hen had come off the nest with her little brood that the mother of the Shanghai chickens began to have so much trouble. She had 12 as fine chickens as you could anywhere, tall, wide-awake youngsters with long and shapely legs and thick down and feathers. She was very proud of them, as any hen mother might well be, and often said to the Shanghai cock, "Did you ever see so fine a family? Look at those 24 legs, all so long and straight, and not a feather on one of them." His eyes would shine, and he would stretch his neck with pride. But all he ever said to her was, "They will do very well if they only behave as well as they look." He did not believe in praising children to their faces, and he thought their mother spoiled them. Perhaps he was right, for the little Shanghais soon found out that they were good-looking, and they wanted everybody in the poultry yard to notice their legs. It was very foolish, of course, to be proud of such things. But when the other fowls said, "We should think you would be cold without feathers on your legs," they answered, "Oh, we are Shanghais, and our family never wear feathers there." And that was true, just as it is true that the Dorkings have extra toes and the black Spanish fowls have white ears. The Shanghai mother was now roaming the fields with her brood, and there was rich picking in the wheat stubble. All the fowls were out of the yard now and would not be shut up until cold weather. Early in the morning they would start out in parties from 6 to a dozen, with a cock at the head of each. He chose the way in which they should go. He watched the sky for hawks, and if he saw one, gave a warning cry that made the hens hurry to him. The cocks are the lords of the poultry yard, and say how things shall be there. But when you see them leading the way in the fields, then you know why all the fowls obey them. The farmyard people still tell of the day when a hawk swooped down on one of the young Dorkings and would have carried him off if the black Spanish cock had not jumped out, and pecked him and struck at him with his spurs and fought until the hawk was glad to hurry away. The cocks are not only brave, they are polite too, and when they find food they will not eat it until they have called the hens to come and share with them. You can imagine what good times the chickens had in the stubble fields. They were so old now that their down was all covered with feathers, and some of them wondered if they couldn't feel their spurs growing. Still, that was all nonsense, as Bedtime had told them. Because spurs do not start until the fowl is a year old. They had long been too large to cuddle under their mother's feathers at night, and had taken their first lessons in roosting before they went to the stubble fields. They had learned to break up their own food too, and that was a great help to their mother. Fowls, you know, have no teeth, and no matter how big a mouthful one takes, he has to swallow it whole. The only way they can help themselves is to break the pieces apart with their feet, or peck them apart with their bills before eating them. The yellow grains of wheat that lay everywhere in the field were fine food, and should have made the little Shanghais as fat as the grouse which sometimes stole out from the edge of the forest. 11 of the brood were quite plump, but one chicken was still thin and lank. His mother was very much worried about him and could not think what was the matter. She spoke of it to the black Spanish hen one day, but the black Spanish hen had never raised a brood, and said she didn't really know any more about the care of chickens than if she was our dove. Then the anxious mother went to the Shanghai cock about it. He listened to all she said and looked very knowing. "I don't think there is anything the matter," said he. "The chick is growing fast, that is all. I remember how it was with me before I got my long tail feathers. I was very thin, yet see what a fine-looking fellow I am now." He was really a sight worth seeing, as he towered above the other fowls, flapping his strong wings in the sunshine and crowing. His feathers were beautiful, and the bright red of his comb and wattle showed that he was well. "Ah," thought the Shanghai hen, "if my chicken could only become such a fine-looking cock, then she wouldn't worry any more all day." That night, she and her brood roosted in the old apple tree in the corner of the orchard nearest the poultry yard. She flew up with the older fowls and fluttered and lurched and squawked and pushed on first one branch and then another, while the chickens were walking up a slanting board that the farmer had placed against one of the lower branches. It always takes fowls a long time to settle themselves for the night. They change places and push each other, and sometimes one sleepy hen leans over too far and falls to the ground, and then has to begin all over again. At first, the chickens had feared that they would tumble off as soon as they were asleep, but they soon learned that their feet and the feet of all other birds are made in such a way that they hang on tightly, even during sleep. The weight of the bird's body above hooks the toes around the branch, and there they stay until the bird wishes to unhook them. After a long time, all the fowls were asleep with their heads under their wings. The sheep, pigs, and cows were dreaming, and even the horses were quiet in their stalls. There was not a light to be seen in the big white farmhouse. When the Dorking cock crowed in his sleep, that awakened him and all the other fowls as well. Then the other cocks crowed because he did, and he crowed again because they did, and they crowed again because he had crowed again, and the chickens asked if it were not almost morning. And their mothers told them not to talk, but to go to sleep at once and make morning come more quickly. All of this took quite a while, and the Shanghai mother could not sleep again. She could see her brood quite plainly in the moonlight, and one of them was not plump like the rest. She roosted there and worried about him until suddenly she could never tell how it happened. She seemed to know just what was the matter. She flew down beside him and poked him under his wing. "Wake up," she said. "I want to ask you something. Do you eat gravel?" "No," he answered sleepily. I don't like gravel." "Didn't I bring you up to eat it?" she said sternly. "Yes, but I don't like it, and now that I am old enough to roost in a tree, I don't mean to eat it anymore. So, just imagine a chicken talking to his mother in that way. His mother, who had laid the egg from which he was hatched, who had sat upon the nest through all the weary days and nights while he was growing inside his shell, who had cuddled him under her soft feathers, who had taught him all the while, taught him all he knew, and would have fought any hawk to save him. She had begun to love him before he even knew that he was, and had lived for him and his brother and sisters ever since. The mother said nothing more to him then. She spent the rest of the night watching the stars and the moon, and the first rosy flush of the eastern sky, which told that morning was near. Then she said to her naughty chicken, as she began to stir and cheep, "I shall never try to make you eat gravel if you think you are too big to mind your mother. I shall just tell you this, that you will never be strong unless you do. I have not told you why, because you never asked, and I supposed you would do as you ought without knowing the reason. You have no teeth, and you cannot chew the grain you eat before it is swallowed. You have a strong stomach, and if you eat gravel, this stomach or gizzard will rub and press the tiny stones against the grain until it is well broken up and ready to make into fat and strength for your body." "But it doesn't taste good," he replied, "and I'd rather eat other things. I don't believe it matters, and I won't eat it anyway." The Shanghai hen flew down from the tree and clucked to her chickens. She would not waste time talking to him. Whenever he came near her that day, he ate everything but gravel. He had his own way, and yet he was not happy. For some reason, nothing seemed to be any fun. Even lying under the bushes on the sunshiny side was not comfortable, and when he wallowed in the dust with his brothers and his sisters, he didn't enjoy that. Things went on this way for a good many days, and at last he saw that his shadow was only a small black spot on the ground, while his brothers and sisters had big fat shadows. He heard the black Spanish cock call him a bantam, and the Shanghai cock say that he wouldn't live until his spurs grew. One of the Dorking chickens was talking to her sister, and he heard her say, "Imagine him at the head of a flock." Then she laughed, a mean, cackling little laugh. At night, when the rest were asleep in the apple tree, he walked softly down the slanting board and ate gravel. The next morning he felt better than he had in a long time, so when there was nobody around, he ate some more. He didn't want anyone else to know that he had found out his mistake. Every morning he looked at his shadow, and it grew fatter and fatter. Still, he was not happy. and he knew it was because he had not told his patient old mother. He wanted to tell her too. One day he heard her telling his brother to eat more gravel, and the brother said he didn't like the taste of it. That made him speak at last. Suppose you don't like it, you can eat it. Queer world it would be if we didn't have to do unpleasant things. I've just made up my mind that the people who won't do hard things when they ought to have the hardest times in the end. Wish I'd minded my mother and eaten gravel when she told me to. And I'm not going to let you be as foolish as I was. Just then he heard somebody say of him, "What a fine-looking fellow he is growing to be! I like him ever so much now." It was a dorking chicken who had laughed at him. He ran after a grasshopper, and she ran after the same grasshopper. And they ran against each other, and the grasshopper got away. So, of course, they had to wander off together to find something to eat. And after that, they became great friends. The Shanghai hen looked lovingly after him and raised one foot in the air. "Now," she said, "I am perfectly happy." Well, there you go. One nice full hour of food-based stories. We hope you enjoy that. We hope you have a good night. That is the end of tonight's stories. If you want more, or you have a story you'd like me to read, please email me, bigbossj@gmail.com. We are live Monday to Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern at twitch.tv/bigvoicej. The podcast version is coming soon. There's some DNS things that have to happen, and it takes a long time to update. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good night.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.